Hello class, welcome to lesson 3 of unit 4 on dividing fractions. Okay, so today things are going to get a bit more challenging if they weren't already. So it should be exciting though because it's a chance to learn some fun stuff. So let's take a look at the first task of the day here. We have homemade jams is what we're talking about, all right? And for these they tell us they want us to draw a diagram and write a multiplication equation to represent each of the following situations. And then also go ahead and answer the question at the end. All right, so you may be wondering, wait, if the unit is dividing fractions and it says to write a multiplication equation, aren't those two different things? And actually, no, they're not. There are two different ways of representing the same situation. All right, so in each of these stories, you are going to be able to think about it in terms of division and also in terms of multiplication. So I'm going to go over both of those with you here. All right, so for number 1, it says Mai had 4 jars. In each jar, she put 2 1/4 cups of homemade blueberry jam. All right, I bet that tastes good. Although, altogether, how many cups of jam are in the jars? All right, so the most important thing here is to try to understand the situation. What's going on here? We have 4 jars, right? So it may help you to go ahead and just draw 4 of something, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm sure many of you can do a much better job than I on the drawing, but it's not a big deal if you kind of have a hard time with that. All right. The idea is that I have 4 jars here, and in each of these, she put 2 1/4 cups of homemade blueberry jam. 2 1/4 here, 2 1/4 here, 2 1/4 here, 2 1/4 here. Let me go ahead and write that in here for us. 2, and I put a little spacer, 2 1/4. I need to get this all the way down to the smallest size. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to paste that into each of the other boxes. 2 1/4, and then another 2 1/4. I guess when you copy and paste in here, the color changes on the last little number, so that's okay. We get the main point. So you can see that's a little diagram to kind of help us to understand what's going on. All right. So if we want to know how many cups of jam there are, we can think about it in a few different ways, actually. Many of you can probably see that we could actually go ahead and we could add up all of these, right? 2 1/4 plus 2 1/4 plus 2 1/4 plus 2 1/4. So that would be an option in this case here. That would be one way that we could help you find the answer. You might even be able to do that in your head, really. But I want you to understand it in terms of both multiplication and division as well. All right, very, very important. So if you look at this question here, if she has 4 jars and she's putting 2 1/4 cups of homemade blueberry jam in each of those, okay, we want to know how much jam there was altogether, right? So really what she's doing is she's taking the total amount of jam that she has and she is going to be dividing it 4 different ways, right? So if she takes, let me write a text box here. So if she takes all of the jam that she has, which we're going to have to call that a blank because we don't know how much jam she has, right? All of the jam she has, and then she's going to divide it into 4 jars, divided by 4, because it's going to be divided 4 ways. That's going to equal 2 1/4, right? That's how much is going to be at each one. So we can think about it like that. Something divided by 4 equals 2 1/4. Okay. Now, for multiplication, if you look at this here, we can also relate it to addition because we're adding the same thing over and over again. So if we are adding 2 1/4 over and over again, 2 1/4, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, that's the same thing as taking 2 1/4 and multiplying it times 4. Okay, and then so we just have to figure out what that actually is in order to get our answer. 2 1/4 times 4, you could have also gotten the answer already, like I said, by adding. Okay, but 2 1/4 times 4, well, the idea is we need to go around the world with 2 1/4. We need to uh, write that as a improper fraction. So 2 1/4 times 4. If you see your 2 1/4 right here, if we go around the world, let me do a little drawing. We're going to take 2 times 4, that's 8, and then we're going to add 1 to that. So it's going to be 9 is going to be your numerator, and your denominator is going to be the denominator here, 4. So 9/4. So it's going to be 9/4, whoops, and still multiplying times 4. All right, so 9/4 times 4. So let me actually write this in with the pen so you guys can see it a little bit easier. 9/4 times 4. Okay, so if we have a fraction multiplying times a whole number, we need to make the whole number to a fraction by putting it over 1. And so this is going to give us 9 times 4. That's 36 over 4 times 1 is 4. So 36 over 4, that's the same thing as 36 divided by 4, and that is 9. All right, so you could have also gotten 9 by adding these here. 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, that's 8. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, that's 4/4, which is 1 whole. So 8 plus 1 also equals 9. Okay, and when we get into dividing fractions, in a little bit, we're going to show you a little bit more on how to work this out a little easier, but you're going to get 9 if you work that out as well. Okay, so I will show you the diagram of that on the next page as well, a different version of it, but you can see here this is one way it can look. It's just the basic idea of having four things which can represent the jars, and then each of them has 2 1/4 in there. All right, so let me erase all this here, and let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. Question number 2 talks about Priya having 5 jars, and in those 5 jars, she uses a total of 7.5 cups of strawberry jam. How many cups of jam are in each jar? Okay, so let's understand what's happening here. So here we know the total amount of jam she used, right? She used 7.5 cups. And we know that she divided that 5 ways, right? 7.5 divided 5 ways. So we want to see how many cups that there are. Okay, so we can think about it in that sense, right? 7.5 divided 5 ways. All right, now, but we can also think about it in terms of multiplication. Okay, so we know that when she was multiplying here, she was going to be multiplying 5 times some unknown number of cups. We know that the total was this, but we don't know how much was going to be in each of the cups. So we want to see what we can do here to make this work. All right, so let me erase this here, and let me go ahead and show you how this can work. So this is another way to see, you'll see number 1 and number 2. Okay, let's go up here. Oops. All right, so you can see here, you can see number 1, just see that as well. For number 2, you can see that you're going to be taking 5, the 5, and you're going to be multiplying times some unknown amount to get 7.5. See this here? 5 unknowns times 7.5. She's taking the 5 jars and she's putting an unknown amount in each one. So 5 times the unknown equals 7.5. So if we write that out here for number 2, go a little bit bigger. 5 times an unknown equals 7.1/2. Well, okay, so we need to have a little space here so we can make sure that it's clear. So we need to see, okay, how do we figure out what's going to go in this blank here? Well, we can use this equation, but we're going to go ahead and we'd actually divide by 5. Right? We would do 7.5 divided by 5. So if you think about it here, we can think about it in a few different ways, but 7.5 divided by 5 is going to be, you might have already seen the answer. So it's 1.5 cups per jar. So it's less than 2 cups per jar, right? It's 7.5. You can think of like being 7.5. And so 7.5 is halfway between 5 and 10. So that's why it's 1.5 cups per jar. Okay. And then so for number 3. Han had some jars. He put 3/4 cup of grape jam in each jar using a total of 6 3/4 cups. How many jars did he fill? Okay, so let's see what's happening in this problem. Each jar is getting 3/4 of a cup. Okay, but we don't know how many jars that there were, right? So if you remember in the first case here when we had 2 1/4 across 4 jars, well, now what we can draw is we can go ahead and we can say, okay, so we have these jars and they're going to have 3/4 in them, but we don't know how many of them there are. So if you remember what we did up here, we ended up doing the number of jars times how much was in each jar. Well, now it's going to be the amount in the jar, the 3/4, times some unknown, because we don't know how many are in there. We just know that at the end, the total ended up being 6 3/4. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to be taking 3/4 and we're going to be multiplying it times the unknown. We don't know how many jars that is, but we just know that the total is going to end up being equal to 6 3/4 cups. Okay, so the way that this is going to work is we're actually going to end up having to divide by 3/4. So let me give you a little sneak preview on how that's going to work. 6 3/4. I'm going to write it out with a pen. 6 3/4 divided by 3/4. Okay, so if we do it this way, 6 3/4, whenever we do any calculations with a mixed number like this, we want to make it into an improper fraction. So we want to do 6 times 4 and get 24. Add 3 to that, we're going to get 27 over 4. Okay, and we're going to be dividing it by 3/4. So if we divide it by 3/4, all right, what we're going to be learning is that you're going to be multiplying times the reciprocal. So this is really going to be 27 over 4 times 4 over 3. All right, so this is going to be the new little idea here. When we multiply with fractions, you guys should know to look for cross-canceling. You're going to see these as being like fractions if you go in diagonal direction like this. So this 4, this is like 4 over 4, which is really going to be 1, right? So we can actually just cross these out and make these into 1. All right, and so 27 times 1 is 27. And 1 times 3 is 3. You could have canceled these earlier as well, but I wanted to show you the multiplication just so I didn't do too much at once. So 27 over 3 equals 9. So there's 9 jars that you fill it. Let me take you back over so you can see the diagram and the rest here. So for number 3, you can see down here, the multiplication equation, again, they have an unknown times 3/4. We had 3/4 times an unknown, right? Equals 3 1/4. And this is what a diagram looks like. Okay, I'm not sure how much this makes sense to you, but if you look at it here, you can see that you have the jar with 3/4 like we had earlier, right? But then we don't know how many of them there are. So that makes it very, very hard to really make sense of the diagram when you don't know how many of them there are. That's why that question mark is there. So that's why it helps to kind of learn our little dividing by fractions trick right there. It should help you a lot. Okay, so that is it for this activity.